I am not a person. I am the corrugated folds of a cardboard box, once cradling a brand new bassinet sold at JCPenney. I know the weight of objects, and I've learned the weight of a story. That night, at the edge of the Fox Chase Woods in Philadelphia, I became an unwilling coffin. Inside me was silence. The silence of freshly cut hair clumping together. The silence of nails just trimmed. The silence of old scars speaking to one another in the dark. If someone had asked, "What's your name?" I, a box, would not know the answer. All I knew was the wind slipping through my open mouth, sounding like a whisper. What do we call you when no one calls you home? Some cold cases chill us for their brutality. Others make the skin go quiet for what is missing. The absence of a name, a family history, a way back home. In February 1957, on Susquehanna Road, they found the box of a bassinet. Inside it lay a boy, unclothed, underfed, bruised, wrapped in a checkered blanket. For decades, the world lent him borrowed names. The boy in the box, America's unknown child. Then, in December 2022, persistence in science returned a true name to the boy. Joseph Augustus Zarelli. But a name is not always a final period. Sometimes it is only the first letter of another question. The crime occurred in Fox Chase, Philadelphia, on the 2/25, 1957. The child was found in a JCPenney bassinet box, wrapped in a checkered blanket, hair recently cut, nails freshly trimmed, malnourished with multiple scars. Identity announced 12/08/2022 via DNA and investigative genealogy. The case remains an unsolved homicide. Wikipedia, people.com. Let's step from the tree line inward, from the box to the blanket, from the blanket to a child's skin. And in the spaces between, let the piano lead. That afternoon, nothing unusual at the Fox Chase fringe. Just a damp dirt path cutting through knee-high brush, and a man doing his weekly rounds of rabbit traps. He moved steadily, an old canvas sack in his left hand, a homemade walking stick in his right. Pushing past blackberry bramble, his eyes snagged on something odd. A rectangular cardboard box, corrugation dark with moisture. One lid slightly ajar as if drawing breath. He stopped. There was something inside. He looked around. In the woods, silence can sound like a warning. He lowered the stick, lifted the flap, then set it down. His first thought wasn't, "Someone needs help," but, "If I lose my traps, how will I eat?" He walked away, leaving the box to the wind and the dark. The next evening, a college student pulled over after a rabbit darted into the brush as if being chased. He had a habit of following what runs, not to catch, but to learn what it's running from. He parted the branches and saw the box. Moist air lifted. The smell of old cardboard mixed with soil. He knelt, eased the lid, his hand trembling. Then he straightened, stepped back twice, inhaling as if breaking the surface of a lake. Not everyone is ready to be the first to speak a tragedy's name. He went back to the car. This time, silence did not win. A phone rang at a nearby precinct like a knock at midnight. When the officers lifted the blanket, its checkered squares like a toppled chessboard, the wind changed direction. The rest of the city kept its evening. Only Fox Chase stopped. In the report, the letters are cold. Hair recently cut, nails freshly trimmed, surgical scars at the ankle, groin, under the chin, malnutrition, blunt force trauma. But when we read with our ears, the way a sound editor listens to a dead score, we hear scissors ticking through hair, the tiny click of a nail newly evened, and the confession of old scars. Someone once walked this child beneath hospital lights. The body tells its story without words. Ribs like organ keys beneath taut skin, bruises blooming like ink on wet paper, eyelids closed like two notes cut short. The medical examiner set a ruler beside the scars, annotating carefully, a musician counting time. He didn't speak much. This work doesn't require exclamation points. He knew people would look at a stitch under the chin or the ankle and assume, at some point, somebody did try to care. And that cruel arc, care, then abandonment, healing, then harm, is how adults slip on the truth of themselves. The box once held a bassinet, a promise of sleep without fear. On its side, faded type, like the memory of a 5 and dime closing the late shift. The checkered blanket, a square of warmth, became the last curtain between the child and the world's eyes. The bitterest thing about cases like this, objects birthed to cradle, are forced to conceal. Investigators spread the blanket across a steel table, rubbed the rough old wool, hunted for a snagged hair, a dust mote that could talk. To the untrained, it's only a blanket. To them, it's a small map of a room, a house, a cold night. The little room at the precinct swelled with images. Sketches printed, flyers handed out, people gathering to look. The same question on every lip, has anyone seen this boy? A young mother idled long at the bulletin board, looked twice, then clutched the sleeping child in her back seat. A newsstand man read the headline again and again, as if each reading were a prayer. In a small chapel at the street's end, .4, one unknown soul lit a candle for an unknown child. America's unknown child seeped into the city's memory the way rain seeps into stone. Years later, a headstone with that name would become a rendezvous for fresh and fading bouquets, or whispers speaking what loudspeakers can't. Theories sprout like weeds and wither in season. Some mention a crowded home of children, fate's collisions, an accident no one dared to name. Others pass along stories heard secondhand, barroom lore with more shadow than proof. We won't name anyone here. Justice is not a seance. We pencil only. Insufficient evidence, contradictions. Dead ends. Dead ends. But silence speaks. It says this death is not the child's alone, but a test for the grown-ups around him. And sometimes that test stretches across generations, like a piece of music missing its final note. Time isn't always truth's enemy. Sometimes it's how science catches up to grief. One gray weekday morning, they opened Old Earth, asking the past for one more tiny shard of fact. That DNA slipping through digital gates of investigative genealogy brushed a far branch of someone's family tree and answered, present. The ancestral map unfolded like a cloth across the table. An investigator set red dots on possible nodes, threading them together with lines as thin as hope. Each dot stood for a life, with a coffee habit, with letters never mailed, with a memory of a child who didn't get to grow old. On the day the city spoke his true name, no one applauded. No one sighed with relief. They simply stood still a moment, afraid to shatter a name newly fragile in the air. A name opens a lineage. A birth date appears on paper, then an address, then then a question. Who was near you when you still called evening bedtime? In an instant, unknown changes color, from ash gray to a shade carrying memory. Yet a name, though it lifts a person from anonymity, can't tell us everything. Who struck you? Who placed you in a box? Who wrapped you in that blanket? A name is a key. The door still needs someone to turn it. Imagine a disciplined imagining, to fill only with the ordinary details of a life. An American kitchen in the 1950s, a radio low, a cream formica table, a wall calendar of round squares, a 4-year-old at the window, legs swinging above the floor, watching a sparrow balance on a wire. He mouths, "Ma, pa," then learns to hide tears like adults. Across the street, someone salts a walkway against ice. Somewhere else, a person drops a key, bends to pick it up, unaware that streets away. A city is about to drop a child into its collective memory. Joseph's days, now we can say his name, might have been full of scratchy sweaters, midday dozes by the window, evenings of radio voices meant for grown-ups. These images aren't for melodrama. They're pins on a mute map, so that when we look, we see the childhood that should have been and understand why one blanket could never be warm enough for a night like that. When the headstone took the name, those who'd laid flowers for America's unknown child lifted their faces to the sky and lingered. They whispered Joseph like a late apology. Someone set down a small blue toy. Someone else left a folded scrap of paper, a charm. An old man read the name 3 times, then saluted, as if greeting a soldier home at last. Names are how we return dignity to the gone. But names also remind us, the story isn't over. We've learned to call the nameless unknown. But nameless doesn't mean storyless. It means a story without a narrator. Today, DNA often narrates for us. It gathers the stray crumbs of memory scattered in distant kin, assembles them into a name, 0.4, and knocks. Even so, light needs restraint. A floodlight on the past can blind those still learning how to live with it. What we need is the desk lamp at midnight, close enough to read, gentle enough not to startle. Back to the scene, once more. Picture the hand, so much larger than a 4-year-old's, lowering the box. Susquehanna Road, empty. Cold. Engine noise fades. Dry twigs grind together like clenched teeth. Adults sometimes do the unforgivable, then reach for a blanket to cover it. But corrugation isn't a quilt. 0.4, and a forest isn't a bedroom. If once, in some room, your laughter rang, then that night, it must have fallen to the floor like a spoon slipping from a hand. On local radio, the case became a story retold and retold. A baritone announcer, the street name, the scene described. In many homes, someone watched their child a beat longer, brushed a hand across a short haircut, and swallowed a question. Someone called the hotline at 2 a.m., said they once saw a boy who looked like that, then cried before the second sentence. Sketches, looked like faces trying to remember another face. An artist gave the eyes a touch of fatigue, a sliver of hope, and something that exists only in children. Up in the newsroom, a window cracked open against the smoke. A reporter typed 3 different first lines. A child was found. A name was misplaced. A box and a blanket. A noir podcast does not chase thrills. It seeks a light soft enough not to wake the sleeping, warm enough to uncurl a soul. In telling Joseph's story, we do not dig to expose. We unpeel old frost so a breath can pass through. To tell it this way is to honor the pauses. A pause is an emptiness. It's where the listener places their heart, and a distant life becomes familiar. When a name returns, 0.6, the journey home only begins. The police continue. The answer about who caused the death still hides in some old attic, among boxes, sun-faded photos, and letters never mailed. Perhaps someone, now very old, still keeps a trinket from that year. A button? 0.4. A picture no one in the house remembers. If you're hearing this and something strange lives in your memory, write it down. Memory is a clumsy carpenter. It hammers off beat, cuts crooked. But sometimes, one warped piece of wood is enough to fill the gap in an old table called truth. As a rule, we teach ourselves. We say, 0.4, every death deserves a name. After the name, an answer must still arrive. On a rainy night, I pass a cemetery in Cedarbrook. Low stones, wet grass, a name glimmering under a jaundiced streetlight. Joseph Augustus Zarelli. I don't know your favorite candy, whether you loved running barefoot through the grass or hated dirty fingers. But I know your hair was freshly cut, your nails newly trimmed, and a checkered blanket was never warm enough. Adults sometimes leave stories that cannot be forgiven. The rest of us, those who come after, inherit a small, difficult task: to speak the right name of the one who's gone. And to keep asking, patient as rain tapping stone, who placed you in the box? Why? Until one day, 0.4, the answer steps out, stands under the light, and faces the name they stole. 1.6.